Okay, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are on the planet right now. I'm Royce Fletcher Thomason, and we're back for another time with just spreading some love, spreading some light, spreading some good vibes for our edification, for our growth, development, unfoldment, and hopefully to help us live the best version of ourselves and have the most fulfilling experience of life that we can possibly have, right? And so I just want to, as we're getting started, I'm sending a bunch of peace and love to everybody. And let's just, as people are coming in, I just want to uh, just kind of set the atmosphere for the space and the time that we're going to share here together today. Or if you're checking this out on a rebroadcast, on a playback or whatever. So I just want to take a moment and consciously invite the presence of God into this space, into this time and space called now, into the spaces in us where we're needing to hear and receive what's being shared today, into the spaces where we feel maybe something missing in our lives or something where there's room for more, room for an upgrade, room for an elevation. Feel those spaces where we may feel some degree of emptiness. And we invite your presence into those spaces, God. We invite your presence into the ears and the hearts and the lives of all of us who are participating in the live broadcast or even the playback. Everyone who's loved by everyone who watches this broadcast. Everyone who loves everyone who watches this broadcast. We pray your blessings into the lives of each and every one. Your presence active and alive in the lives of each and every one. May your goodness and your grace and your light and your love, your peace and your power shine forth brightly, magnetizing us unto you and transforming our lives. And for this, we give great thanks. Ashe and amen. So I hope that everyone is doing well on today. So our topic for today is really dealing with filling the voided spaces in our lives, right? Filling those areas in our lives where we may feel some degree of a void, where we may feel like something's missing. Who can relate to that? We can relate to feeling like there's something that's kind of missing in your life. There's something uh, that you might not necessarily be able to put your finger on, but you're maybe not quite where you'd like to be. Maybe in a certain area of your life, maybe just in life in general. Maybe you're at a point where you feel like, I should have been beyond where I am now. Or maybe you're at a point where you're feeling some sense of loss. Maybe dealing with the loss of a job, the loss of a loved one, you know, loss of your useful body, you know, whatever those things are, whatever those things are that might show up as a void in your life, you know, the reality is that you're not alone in that. All of us, in one way or another, all of us really, on some level, experience this sense that something's missing, or there's some area where we may feel some emptiness, or there's some area where we may feel a loss or fear loss. Maybe there's some area where we might be struggling or just wanting things to be a little better than they already are, even if they're already well, right? And so, our kind of topic for today is dealing with filling the voided spaces. Just realized that my mic was sitting on the desk, but not actually. My apologies, folks. Probably sounds loud as I'm putting my mic on. I just realized that as I looked down and saw it on the table. Oh, Lordy be, that I did not actually have my microphone on. So if it's making a lot of noise and rustling sounds as I'm putting this on, my deepest apologies. Okay, all right. Hopefully that's on well and it stays on and you can hear me and not the sound of the mic rubbing against my shirt. So again, just sending out a bunch of love and peace your way to everybody who's out there, and hope that you're all doing well. Always like to know who's here, so if you don't mind commenting, just waving, saying hello or something, it's always a blessing to see that. So what we're dealing with is, again, this topic of filling the voided spaces. What is a void? What is a void? A void is simply really the absence of a presence. The absence of a presence. And so, there are different areas where we feel something is missing maybe in our lives. There are areas where we might sometimes feel like there's something that we need to do. There's something that we need to use to distract ourselves. There's something that we need to occupy our minds with. These are things that are part of our human experience, right? I want to say to us right now that I know that all of us have different things that we're going through, different things that we're growing through, different stages that we are on our life's journey. And although not everybody is in the same space, not everybody thinks the same way. Not everybody is in the same stage in their life. Not everybody gets along with everybody else, and not everybody necessarily vibes well with us. But what is true is that all of us do have some things that are fundamentally similar, and all of us have some areas where we would like to feel good about our lives. All of us have some areas where we might struggle with one thing or another. Hey, Melanie Ivy, good to see your face in the space. And to everybody else who is here as well. But all of us have sometimes these points. Sometimes it feels more acute than other times where we feel maybe some area of a void. I think about scripture, the Bible and in the book of Genesis opens up and says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form and what? And void. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. Darkness, again, is a void. Sometimes there are areas in our lives where things are without form, where they're without structure, where we can't necessarily feel it or relate to it tangibly. Greetings, Jennifer Bliss. Hope that you're doing well today, First Fam. But we have these areas in our lives where we sometimes feel like something
sometimes we might not even be able to quite put our hand on it. We feel like something is kind of missing. Uh, we have sometimes we have desires and dreams and hopes and wishes in our lives. We've conceptualized it in our mind, and that's maybe where it stays. It stays without form. It stays a void in our lives. There's some areas, we were talking not last week, the week before last. We were talking about shining a light on your own shadows, and we're talking about how darkness really in itself doesn't exist. It's merely the absence of light. And we, as spiritual beings, we're beings of light, right? We're beings of light, but we're also dealing with this physical stuff and the things that come with being spiritual beings and living in a physical reality or experience or perspective, as to where it becomes a reality when you shine the light on something physical. A shadow is created as a result of that. And so, though we are spiritual beings, we also have shadow aspects of our existence where we're needing to shine light. Uh, and again, a void isn't a thing that actually exists, it's the absence of something, it's the absence of a present, darkness of a presence. Darkness isn't something that actually exists, it too is the absence of something, in this case, light. And so, to me, like in the biblical record, there's so much there that can be taken at a surface level, and there's a whole lot more there that we can look at and explore on a much deeper level. And so, you know, we're all made in the image and likeness of God. We're made of the same stuff that God is made of. And in that sense, we have co-creative power. Okay. And so, I was saying a couple weeks ago that everything that we experience in our lives is simply the harvest of the seeds that we've sown. And the more that we can really understand about the essence of God, the more we can understand about ourselves. Because at our core, we're made of the same stuff that God is. And there are certain things that unfold in our lives that are according to the divine design, according to which God set this whole thing up. And the more we are aware of that and tap into it, the better off we are in our lives. And so we have these areas in our lives where we feel these voids. And it's a scientific law that nature abhors a vacuum. Any place where there's some void, any place where there's something that isn't filled, it's a scientific law that something will seek to fill that space. So is the case with us in our lives, even on just a psychological level. And so sometimes we try to fill these empty spaces with work. Sometimes we try to fill these empty spaces with, substances. Sometimes we try to fill these empty spaces with food. Sometimes we fill these empty spaces with these devices. We try to fill the empty spaces with social media. We try to fill the empty spaces with sex. We try to fill the empty spaces with all kinds of distractions because we're aware that there's some void there and we don't want to feel the pain of the void, right? Because we know that it's unnatural for the void to exist on some level. We instinctively seek to fill those voided spaces because it's painful for a void to exist in a space where the void wasn't designed to be, right? And so we end up we experience the loss of a loved one, and we feel that as a void, and we grieve over them. We grieve what we call their loss, really our loss of their presence in our lives. Or we lose a job and we feel that there's a void there because in this society, so much of our identity is connected to what we do for a living, what somebody else says that we have value, uh, and because they're willing to pay us to do that, right? And so even a person meets you socially, one of the first things that they ask you is, "What do you do?" You don't even go into telling them what you do. You tell them, you make an I am statement. I'm an engineer. I'm a project manager. I'm a stay at home mom, whatever the case is, you know. And then I work with people who are in the process of looking for a new position. Maybe they were working for a long time and a very good job, but struggling now how to find a job in this current market, right? And so, people end up feeling that sense of void, of a loss of identity. Phew. Who else deals with lost identity? People with empty nest syndrome, who've been raising children and their children are leaving the nest. That creates a sense of a void. You know, there are a lot of areas where we experience a void. You'd like to be in a beautiful relationship with a significant other, and there's a void that's felt if you don't have that. Or what I believe is even worse, you're in a relationship with somebody and it just feels like emptiness. There's a void that's felt there, and on top of the void, you feel a sense of being trapped, right? But what it is, and all of these different, ooh, or maybe a parent wasn't in your life, or maybe both weren't in your life. That can create a sense of void for sure, right? And so we end up having these, what can feel like holes in our hearts, what can feel like unfulfilled spaces in our lives, where we sometimes, in different ways, spend our whole lives searching for a way to fill that void, searching for a way to fill that void. It sometimes creates pain in us, or sadness in us, or grief in us, or confusion, or low self-esteem in us, different things, right? And it doesn't show up the same for everybody all the time. But the reality is this: we all have these spaces where there's some kind of void there. Here's the reality: anything in your life that's a problem, hmm, sometimes we think we have a problem on our job, or that we have a problem with our finances, that we have a problem with our children, that we have a problem with our spouse. Yeah, we have a problem with our parents, or we have a problem with our siblings. We have a problem with people in our social circle. We have these different problems, these different issues that we have that we're dealing with. And at the end of the day, we really just have one problem. At the end of the day, it's a God problem. It's a God problem. It's a God problem. And so the thing about God is that God isn't really actually the problem. We have a God problem. And the problem is that there's in some way a God-sized hole in a certain area of our lives. And we try to fill that hole with different things. And it may be a God-sized hole in the shape of your mother, if that relationship wasn't what you wanted it to be. Or it may be a God-sized hole in the shape of your father, if that wasn't what you wanted the relationship to be. Or it might be a God-sized hole in the shape of your children. Maybe you wanted children and never had them. Maybe there's a God-sized hole in your life, a void in the shape of some unfulfilled dream, whatever that might be. But do you know the commonality in what I said in all of those things? Is that it's a God-sized hole. Huh. And a God-sized hole can only be filled with one thing. It might be in the shape of your father. It might be in the shape of your mother. It might be in the shape of a child. It might be in the shape of a spouse. It might be in the shape of all of these different things, but it's still a God-sized hole. And the only thing that can really fill that void, the only thing that can fill that hole, the only thing that's big enough to fill it is actually God. Is actually God, right? So let's deal with this for a minute. Okay. I know the couple people who've checked in. You know a little bit about me that in terms of the healing work and stuff. Jennifer, you trained in transcending the matrix, and the reality is that every sickness and every disease is the result of an area in our lives where we've shut down, where we've closed off, and we've not necessarily invited in and welcomed the presence of God into that specific space. Okay. Maybe somebody let us down. We closed ourselves off because we didn't want to get hurt there again. Maybe there's some resentment from some things that happened in our past. We closed ourselves off. We shut some things down, try to protect ourselves. Maybe there's some guilt or some shame that we feel based on mistakes that we've made or poor decisions that we made that negatively impacted somebody else or maybe even negatively impacted us. And so we've got these different things going on inside of ourselves and we kind of tuck that away. But here's the thing. Welcoming in the presence of the light of God's love into those spaces is what creates the transformation. That is the secret behind the healing. That is what creates the transformation. It is because we have these areas in our lives where we have shut ourselves off from the source, right? Where we shut ourselves off from the source. If you take a leaf off of a tree, the leaf begins to die. Why? Because it's been disconnected from its source. And so in all of us, our life is connected with our connection to our source. Okay? Our life is fulfilled based on our connection with our source. Okay? And so, I've got this ring light sitting right here. It's plugged into a power strip, and the power strip is connected to the wall. If I unplug this power strip, or if I unplug the just the lamp itself, it'll still be this ring light, but it won't be giving off any light. It won't be fulfilling its purpose because it isn't able to, because it's not connected to the source of the power. Okay. The thing about this light is that when it's connected with the source of the power, it gets to express the source of the power in a certain form, in the form in which this ring light expresses the power of the source of its power is through the emanation of light. Okay. Dig that. Let that sink into your spirit for a minute. Okay. Now remember what I said earlier? You and I are light at our core. We're made of the same stuff as God. And so what is the problem that we face? What is the problem that we face? The problem that we face is disconnection from our source. disconnection from God. And we just need to plug back in to our power source, right? We just need to plug back into our power source. And so I want to, and we're probably not going to be all that long today unless somebody has some questions or some comments. I'd like us to, though, begin to do some inner work right now. I want us to do some inner work right now. And so I'd like each of us to take some time to just take a moment and think about an area in your life. And I know that you're blessed people. I know that you've got some good things going in your life. I also know that there's some things in your life that you'd like to see go to another level, right? And so I'd like to invite you to just take a moment and to get present to some area in your life where you feel like maybe something's missing. An area of your life where you may feel a sadness or an anxiety or an uncertainty. Somewhere where you may feel some distrust, some disappointment, some loneliness. An area of your life where you may feel some heartbreak, some resentment, some depression, some worry. We're not going to judge you for having those feelings. We encourage you not to judge yourself. We just invite you to get present to those, whatever they are. Maybe an area of maybe feeling overwhelmed. Whatever those feelings are, I want you to just take a moment and get present to them and allow yourself to feel those feelings. Allow yourself to feel them. We're not going to leave you there, but just take this moment and be present to what actually is there. What is the area where you're feeling a void? Allow yourself to get really in touch with what the root of that is. We're doing all these things, spinning our wheels, trying to fill the void with something that can never ultimately fill the void. And so then we end up getting locked in. Just get in touch with it for a moment. Allow yourself to feel it. Without judgment, allow yourself to just be in that space. Maybe it's something that you tucked away and tucked deep down inside because you didn't want to feel it. You didn't want to deal with it. You were too busy with life to take the time to really look at it or address it. And I invite you to just take a moment and get present to it. This is a safe space. We're not going to leave you here. Just get present to that. And now, what I'd like you to do is get in touch with where in your body you're feeling this discomfort. Is it showing up in your heart? Is it showing up in your shoulders, in your chest? In your back? In your stomach? Where is it showing up? Let's get present to that for a moment. And then now, invite the light of God's love into that space. Invite the presence of God into that space and God's love and God's light into that space. God's healing power into that space. God's grace into that space. God's peace into that space. God's transforming power into that space. Allow yourself to feel God's presence, God's light, God's love infiltrating the space where you had been feeling maybe blocked off or cut off. Invite God's love into your awareness of the space where maybe you hadn't previously, or at least not fully. All right. Now, how does that feel? You feel a shift in you? You feel a shift somewhere? This is how liberation takes place. This is how transformation takes place. This is how transmutation takes place. I want to check in with you all. How are you feeling out there right now? How are you feeling right now in this moment? The reality is that life on planet Earth is a complex game of hide and go seek. That's all it is. That's all it is. Life on planet Earth is a complex game of hide and go seek. We're hiding. Sometimes we're running. We're running from God in some areas. In some areas where we've gotten it twisted and we thought that God was hiding from us. And really, what our job is to seek all the places in us, to seek out all the places in us, all the places in our lives, and look for a way to find God there. Look for a way to find God in every aspect of our lives, in every life situation, in every decision, in every disappointment, in every trauma. Now, God isn't the source of the trauma, but God is the source of the healing from it. God has never left you, never forsaken you. God is always with you. In what ways can you seek out and find God in the midst of whatever is going on in your life? It is a truth. God has never left you and never forsaken you. It is a truth that all things are working together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to God's purpose. There is a purpose in your life. There's a purpose for everything that you've been through. There's a purpose for every challenge that you faced. What is it? That's what our job is, to figure that out, to invite the presence of God into that, to seek God's direction and how to operate from it, to see whose life we can touch as a result of the challenges that we've been faced with and that we've learned how to overcome. To be able to identify with the struggle of another person because we are present to what our own have been. And we've been diligent enough to be able to see beyond our own stuff, beyond our own temptation to invite ourselves and others to pity parties or victimhood rallies. Oh, guys, that's so tempting to do, isn't it? It's so tempting to do, but the reality is that there's nothing that you've been through in your life that was ultimately intended to break you. Now, there may have been some situations where maybe you've encountered some unscrupulous people, where the enemy in your own mind is sought to break you. But in the midst of it, God's got you. In the midst of it, God's there for you. In the midst of it, just plug back into the power source. Just plug back into the power source and see what things are transformed in your life. Oh, I love you all so much. I really do. And because I do, with a heart of compassion, I want us all to be the best versions of ourselves we can possibly be. And I know that there are things that happen in our lives that we don't necessarily quite understand. I know there are things that happen and unfold in our lives that might sometimes feel like they're coming out of left field. I know that there are things that happen that we may feel confused by, that we may have this whole boatload of emotion that we might go through. But the reality is this: God's got you. God's got you. And a truth, again, is that all of the places where you're feeling hurt, where you're feeling broken, where you're feeling disappointed, where you're feeling confused, all of those things are just an invitation to invite the presence of God into those places. And it's not that anything that comes your way is in and of itself bad, right? It's not that any of it is in and of itself bad. It so often is just our perspective on it. And our perspective is a function of only seeing a very limited part of the picture. There are some areas where you have grown to be the person that you are in a way that you never would have if there had not been certain challenges in your life. There are some areas in your life where you definitely, Melanie, we talked about this yesterday, where you definitely wouldn't have voted for this. You wouldn't have said, "Yeah, I'll have this in my life, please." You wouldn't have consciously chosen that, but on some level, you still did. On some level, you still did. And if you're going to accept full responsibility for your life, rather than wallowing in what happened or in what could have been, you'll take a position, a power position, and say, where do I go from here? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What light can be shed in this? How can I connect more fully in the midst of this? All of it is part of our journey. And some of the things that happen in our lives are things that we're excited about and that we love, that we're really enthused about. And some of the things that happen in our lives feel like they really suck. But the thing of the matter is, guess what? I talk about, sometimes in my own life with people who are individually in my life. I talk sometimes about COVID and how this whole thing has impacted all of us in different ways. But I share, in a very transparent way, with people who are close to me, different ways that I've personally been impacted by it. And for as many things that I say that are like negative impacts, I've got more things that are positive impacts that I wouldn't have experienced if COVID didn't take place. Again, it's all a matter of, I encourage you all to check out that message from 2 weeks ago on shining light on your own shadow. On shining light on your own shadow. Because starting a new organization called the Integrative Recovery and Injury Specialist, a wellness organization. In, um, Integrative Recovery and Injury Specialist, LLC. And in some cases, we typically think of LLC as limited liability company, and it is that. But in this case, the LLC also represents Love and Light Center, and that's what it's all about. The iris is a part of the eye, and Jesus said, if your eye is single, in other words, if your eye is whole, your whole body will be filled with light. Okay, and so our hugest challenge is our perspective, the way that we are seeing things. The way that we're seeing things, and however we're seeing things, it's always going to be from a limited perspective. It's always going to be from a limited perspective. But if we can remember that, if we can ask God to open our eyes, look at things a little bit differently, see things from maybe a little bit of an elevated perspective, see life not from the standpoint of all these bad things that are happening to us, but see life from the perspective of God is with me every step of the way. God is with me in this journey. God is with me in the challenges that I'm facing in my marriage. God is with me in my singleness. God is with me in my work life or in my business. God is with me in this health challenge that I'm dealing with right now. God is with me in my experience of still feeling a little bit cut off. God is with me in the decisions that other people are making that have some level of impact on my life. God is with me in the midst of, economic uncertainty. God is with me as the price of gas keeps going up and up, and I need to be able to put fuel in my vehicle and food on my table. God is with me in the presence of all of these things. And as you start seeing things in that way, you start remembering this, then the light is shining much more brightly. And you can see things much more clearly. And when you realize again that you're going to whatever area you're feeling a void in your life, you're going to fill it with something. You're going to fill it with something. Whether it's a television, a relationship, a substance, social media, drama, you're going to fill it with something. Why not fill it with God? Why not fill it with God? The only thing that's going to actually bring ultimate satisfaction anyway, right? And we're talking about getting to a place where we are dwelling in a sustainable state of supreme satisfaction, right? A sustainable state of supreme satisfaction. So many things that we look to fill the voids are things that pass, things that have a limited shelf life, things that are set up to disappoint us. The one thing that isn't is God, right? Even though we sometimes feel disappointed with God because of our limited perspective where that's concerned too. But the more that we're seeking to, with a genuine heart, seeking to really understand, seeking to be shown things clearly, seeking divine guidance and God's insight, right? And going with that and trusting that it's there, trusting that it's provided for you, trusting that if you're asking God, God isn't going to just leave you hanging. And with an open and receptive and willing heart, being open to receive that and move and flow in it. That's what it's all about. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you will have spent months or years even sleeping. You will have spent years watching television. You will have spent, at this point, probably some years just scrolling the internet, looking on social media. Now you got to sleep, but some of those other things, if you were to take those things, if you were to take that and add those years onto your life, how could you use those things in more productive ways? And those things that you're just using to fill a void, right? Things that you're just using to fill a void. But what if you filled that space with God? Let God direct you in how to operate and where to operate from, and then use that time for something actually productive, right? Oh gosh, listen. I'm speaking with you all, but I'm speaking to myself too. You know, life is a journey, and we're all walking this thing out the best that we know how in the moment. And we all stumble and fall sometimes along the way. We all veer off course sometimes along the way. Sometimes we veer so far off course that you know, that we may even feel lost. But the reality is that we're never really lost. The reality is God knows exactly where we are. Hmm. Every moment, God knows exactly where we are. And if we tap back in, if we tap back in, we'll find that we're where we need to be. We'll find that we're exactly where we need to be. So just checking in with you all. Hey, Reverend Shahira, greetings, Shirley Price Lawson. Good to see you all in the space today. I want to check in with you all. How are you all doing? How are you feeling? Anybody have any questions or comments? If so, wonderful. If not, we're going to go ahead and keep it moving and get ready to close out for the day. But what I'd like to do is as we prepare to close is I like all of you. I like all of us. I like all of us to just take a moment, to just take a moment and think about God. Just take a moment and think about God. And there's one word that I want you to say to God. And that word is yes. I want you to just think about God and say yes. Say yes. You don't even have to know what you don't even have to know what the thing that God is wanting you to do or where God is wanting you to go yet. But just say yes. Say yes and feel where God ends up leading you. See where God ends up taking you. Greetings, Ketrin. Sending peace and love to you today, cousin. Say yes to God. Say yes to God. You know, I said earlier, we're playing this game of hide and go seek. The reality is that every 7.8 billion humans on the planet at our source is love and light. For people who've done the Transcending the Matrix training, you've heard me talk about we're really all advanced souls. Some of us are pretending that they're not. We've come to this earth with agreement with other souls. And sometimes that agreement shows up as them behaving in ways that don't vibe too well with us. And really, we're just playing the game of hide and go seek. Our job is to remember, to find them, to find the presence of light in them, to remember who they are. And sometimes when we find that, they take off this disguise of the person with the attitude, this disguise of person with sickness and dis-ease, this disguise of just lower vibrational frequencies. And then we see them in their wholeness. The same is true with us. We take on these different things, these sickness, diseases, problems, issues, anxieties, turmoil, until we can find the presence of God in us. In the midst of those things, find the presence of God in us. And in the midst of that, those things disappear. You know what heaven is? Heaven is the home of God. Heaven is where God is. The reality is there's nowhere that God isn't. That's why Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you. We just got to see it. We just got to find it. We just got to find it. We've just got to find it. Ah, may we be good at finding. So often, so many of us go through life searching for something to fill the void. And really, all we need to do is find God in every space, in every circumstance, in every situation, in every area of our lives, and in every person. When you do that, you'll find that life is a totally different experience. I'd bet my bottom dollar on that. God bless you all. I love you. And I'm just going to take a moment and just say a little prayer for all of us. God, you are so magnificent and so awesome. Infinity and eternity both exist within you. Your vastness is unsurpassed. Your power is unmatched. Your radiance is beyond comprehension. There's no way in our finite, limited human thinking that we can fully comprehend you. But you are the solution to every problem. You are the source that provides every need. You are the grace that is sufficient. And you're the love that we've always been looking for. God, we invite you into the places where we have, for whatever reason, tried to do this thing called life on our own. Where we've tried to do things according to our own strength. Where we've tried to do things based on our own egos. We've just gotten ourselves in trouble by doing that. But we choose to turn to you, to trust in you with all of our hearts, and lean not unto our own understanding. In all of our ways, God, may we acknowledge you, knowing that it is your good pleasure to direct our paths. And that you, if you're directing us on a path, then it's a path to a place that we want to go. We might not even yet know that we want to go there. But it's a place that we ultimately want to go. Thank you, God, that you are the light that shines through the darkness, and the darkness doesn't comprehend it, and so it just disappears. We invite the light of your love into every dark place in our lives. We invite the glory of your presence into every single place where we've neglected to do so up to this point. We thank you that you are always more eager to speak to us than we are to listen. That you are ever looking for ways to help us see things as they really are, beyond all of the illusions, and to give us a clear perspective. Thank you, God, that in your infinite wisdom, you allow us room to make mistakes and to learn and to grow from them. Thank you also for inspiring us to not keep trying to do the same thing expecting different results. Thank you for being with us and helping us to overcome that foolishness. And God, I pray that every person who's on this broadcast, whether live or on a playback, feels your presence in their lives in a whole new way. In a whole new way that's thrilling and exciting and powerful and transformative. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for all of these gifts of your divine love. And I affirm it is done. It is done. It is done. God bless you, and I love you, family. Sending about a bunch of peace and love your way. And I'll see you soon.